Well, we can go now live to Brussels to speak to our correspondent, Jack Parrock. Morning to you, Jack. So ever since Friday, the global repercussions are beginning to be felt. From the EU side, do they have a settled strategy at this point, or are they still very much in that kind of knee-jerk reaction mode?
Good morning, Rosie. Well, it does feel a little bit knee-jerk. In fact, there have been some questions asked about how long it took the new president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, to respond to this attack, this airstrike that killed Qasem Soleimani. That happened on Friday. It took her until Monday evening to release a statement. There obviously was reaction from other players in the European Union, but she had promised a geopolitical commission. So there will be questions asked about how long that took. But she only took the office on December the 1st. This is a big crisis, obviously, internationally, and it's the first one, really, that she's having to respond to. As you heard there from that piece, there will be a special meeting of the European Union's foreign ministers here in Brussels on Friday, and that is when we can expect some sort of position from the European Union to be formulated. Because obviously the EU, and it's 28 still just member states, nearly 27 member states, all have different positions on this, and there are obviously bigger players. Germany, France and the United Kingdom are individual signatories to that Iran nuclear deal that was signed back in 2015, so they really have a much stronger say and have a sort of different angle on the deal. But the other European nations as well will want for the European Union to take some sort of combined position and sort of put some position forward towards the Iranians, but also towards the Americans.
Both NATO and the EU have said they want the situation de-escalate. But how much power, how much control do they actually have if the US decides to just act independently?
I think that is exactly the question to be asked, Rosie. How can they really push the US administration, obviously, and President Trump? What can they do to get him to de-escalate when he is clearly has a very set opinion on what he wants to do with Iran, and there are a lot of questions surrounding his motives as well. And also now the Iranians have obviously said that they have no intention of remaining within the 2015 nuclear deal. How can they persuade them to de-escalate, to not react, to not further any sort of violence? That really is the question. How can the European Union persuade them? The main thing really is economically, to try and keep Iran within some angles of the Iran nuclear deal that were preferential for their economies, meaning they could export into the international market, specifically oil. But the measures that the European Union put in place to avoid the secondary US sanctions that the US were putting on any other international firms that worked with Iran after the US pulled out of the deal, the Iranians didn't really feel that they were working. So it's difficult to see what the European Union can do. As far as NATO goes, that gets even more complicated because Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey being a member of the NATO military alliance, has a very, very different position on Iran and cooperation with Iran to the United States that have obviously conducted that airstrike against one of Iran's top generals. It's a real quagmire at the moment, to be honest, Rosie, but we will start to get some clarity, I think, on the EU positions, especially by the end of the week.